got 70% less winged insects in Europe alone. We've lost 70% of the big fish of the ocean. We've lost 50% of the phytoplankton of the ocean. And when we look at the fertility issue that we have, and you may say people are having babies later now, so of course their fertility is impacted there. But snails and mice and badgers and dogs, they're not waiting to have a career and deciding to have babies later, and their fertility is also impacted. So imagine there's 16,000 chemicals making plastic right now. Less than 4,000 of those chemicals have been tested for impact on human health, and a huge chunk of those, well over 2,000, are considered toxic for human health. This is the European Register for Chemicals of Extreme Concern. So somehow this material that has escalated so exponentially in usage in our lifetime has escaped all global regulation. That's something that we need to really look at.
Hi, I'm Cary, and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care, and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief, and tenacity, we can make so many things happen. So welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. I'm so excited to have our guest here today, Sian Sutherland. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
So I heard you speak at the Longevity Forum, I think along with Gabby Logan and a lot of other people, and I couldn't resist to ask you to come on this podcast because I think what you're doing is incredible. You're a multi-award-winning serial entrepreneur driven by belief, innovation, and real-world solutions. I think your passion lies in igniting social change and creating brands, campaigns, and businesses with soul. You've won so many awards, from including Female Marketer of the Year, CEW Achiever Award, Entrepreneur of the Year, and the British Inventor of the Year. And your career has spanned in advertising, Michelin star restaurants, film production, and brand designs. But in 2016, you founded A Plastic Planet, a pro-business, pro-science organisation with one clear goal: to turn off the plastic tap. Oh my goodness. What you have said, what you did at that presentation resonated so well with me because it's solution-based. It's not preachy and telling everybody what they should and shouldn't do, and actually forgiving us all for putting plastic bottles in the litter. But so where did it all start? Because you've had a very, very different career. Your entrepreneurial spirit is very much there. And this is a real mission for you, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. And it's funny because, I've got to the age I am now and about to come up to my 65th birthday. And I feel like I've only just begun. But I also feel that everything that I've done, I started my career in advertising. Then my first, the first company, the first business I set up was age 25, opening a restaurant in Soho, completely mad. But everything that I've done that you've just gone through, and my most latter business was co-founding and running a skincare brand for 11 years. It has built me for what I'm doing now. And that's really clear for me. And I think that my experience in business, but my experience in building communities and building movements and finding niches in very saturated markets like skincare, like restaurants, creating relationships with your users, your customers, all of those things have really built me for having perhaps a little bit more credibility in the world of business and in the world of plastic and business. But also a real understanding of how hard it is to change and a very different way of communicating. Because for me, I come from the world of business. I don't understand the world of charity. I don't really understand the world of the NGO. So everything that I have done, I use this phrase, radical naivety. I've never really known what I was doing when I started the next thing. And I've got to tell you now, it's held me in such good stead. Not knowing the reasons why not is a superpower.
But isn't that the same as a child? Before you fail, you don't know that you're going to fail. And sometimes it's, people write books about how they've done something, how they built their career. And had they read that book, they probably would never have built that.
Totally. Totally. I think radical naivety is much underestimated. And it really is something that we should all embrace. It's funny, this weekend, I'm doing a talk at a big summit of 16-year-olds, and it's all about what are the jobs of the future, and I'm doing a section on that. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is stop thinking about this big moonshot goal that you've got to have in your life, of your career, this end goal, because for me, I'm a proof point of it's not about those big goals and those big ambitions. It's all the little micro moments, and it's maximizing those micro moments. It's turning up fundamentally. It's saying yes to a lot of things. Like, I met you at an event about women and longevity. I got to fess up. I had flu that morning. I felt like death. I dragged myself off the bed because I'd said I would do it. I'd been asked to do it, I believe that you turn up at things and you don't flake out at the last minute and let people down. And what happened from there? I meet you, I meet Gabby Logan, I meet loads of great people. You just never know what's going to happen on these things. So I think treading a different path in a different way is something that people should really embrace and not worry about.
Do you know, I had a conversation with my daughter this morning, and she turned up at an event. She's actually does beauty dinners. I'm sure you two must meet. And she's got a story to tell. And she stood up and told her story, which she hasn't told many people. And it was a bit of a wow story about setting up a business and then the investors crossing her. And I said, that was supposed to happen for you to be where you are today and where you were there last night.
Totally. All those things that feel difficult at the time, you look back and think, now I know why. And actually, I'm a little bit more fearful when we have enough money and things are going too easy, because that's when we all slightly kick back and it doesn't bring out the best in us. Every entrepreneur will know that you're at your best when you have not quite enough money,
And when
because
you're
you're at
back
your most creative.
and your back's against the wall, so you don't think, shall I, shan't I do that? Do I look a fool? Shall I do that? It's just like, I have no choice. I've just got to go out there and do it.
You just get on with it. And the other thing that I'm really aware of is this next generation. And I have two sons, and one of them I laugh at all the time because he's such an overthinker. And we've got to stop overthinking and just get on with stuff. There is no time left for us to procrastinate much longer, and things might not be perfect and fully considered and fleshed out, but just take that step forward. That really great saying of the most important step of every journey is the first step. And we need to take a lot more first steps, knowing that we may have to pivot, may have to choose a different path, but we've started, and starting is the.
And one thing before we get into the actual core of the what you do and the plastic problem is that is that it's very easy to say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to eat sugar, I'm not going to use my mobile phone, I'm never going to use plastic again. But that's not the world we live in. And there was a lovely guy who's been on the podcast before, Roger Frampton, who's the stretch coach. And he said, we are sitters. We are living in the 25th century. We cannot say we can't sit and we're going to walk all day, because that's not where we are. What we have to do is we have to use industry and things to change those things. And where the money's been made to get us into the problems we're in, use that money to get us out of the problems. And what I love about what you've was saying is, let's turn the tap off. So please explain that to me and explain that to our listeners.
Yes. So I think I don't see plastic. So a super brief history, multiple different careers, most latterly co-founding and running a skincare brand. So I mentioned that to reassure everybody. There's no plastic saint speaking here. Massive plastic sinner, millions of plastic bottles I have personally been responsible for putting out into the environment without even thinking about what happens to them next, which is shocking to say. Now we all know what we know, and particularly me. But 15 years ago is a long time in the world of plastic. And then, as you say, in 2016, I was asked to advise the Hong Kong board, who are making the first documentary feature about the problem of plastic and the ocean. It's a documentary that you can still watch called A Plastic Ocean on Netflix. It's 10 years old now, so therefore a lot of the information is slightly outdated, particularly when we talk about recycling plastic and the whole chimera of that. But for me, suddenly meeting the marine biologists and the chemists and the scientists and realizing what we are doing and continuing to do every single day was a massive epiphany. And I was exiting the skincare brand. And like all entrepreneurs, you're thinking, so what am I going to do next? Can I advise other startups? Should I start something else up myself? What's next for me? And somehow I couldn't leave the plastic thing alone. I even did this whole exercise with a friend of mine. It was like, so where are you going to spend your time? Where do you earn your money? But where do you get your joy? Or where do you feel good about what you did? And she came out of it and said, so fundamentally, you've got to move away from plastic. And what did I do? I did nothing but plastic and co-founded a Plastic Planet. So I co-founded a Plastic Planet with an incredible woman, Frederica Magnuson, who is a great, great friend of mine. And we decided we would create a different kind of organization that was nothing to do with waste. I don't see plastic as a pollution problem or a waste problem or a recycling problem. Plastic is an industry problem. It's a design problem. We're fundamentally misusing an incredible but toxic and indestructible material. It's a government problem. It's a health problem. It's all of those things. So we recognized early on that we were going to work with industry and governments. So we are not a charity or an NGO in the way that you would perhaps think. We are a business. And I always say, I used to sell stuff and now I sell change. So we run it really with the rigor of business, with the KPIs and deliverables of business, because that's really the only world that I know. And we work very, very closely with the UN, obviously with the Global Plastics Treaty, but largely with governments on what policy do we need, and then industry. Because my pushback is always, why is it your problem? Why are you having to think about how much plastic you've got in your fridge, the guilt of your recycling bin, and the fact that it's probably going to some container ship to be sent to another country to have to deal with, perhaps to be burnt on the roadside of Turkish villages. That's where our plastic recycling waste is going now. 60% of all our plastic that we put in our recycling bins is exported from the UK, which is waste imperialism on a huge scale. So we've always been very focused on how do we change policy so it's no longer legal for you to have that choice in the first place, so that you can actually go to a supermarket and walk through the aisles and think, oh my God, what's happened? Suddenly I don't see aisle after aisle a Jurassic Park of colored plastic. Now I've got the choice, I've got the right to buy plastic free. That's what we all deserve as shoppers, as individuals. And then working with industry, because as an entrepreneur, obviously, where I get very excited is, so what's the answer going to be? How are we going to live? How could plastic perhaps be this extraordinary gateway, not just as a material, but for me, plastic is so much more than a material. It's a fundamental choice of how we live our lives. And we have gone down this toxic cul-de-sac. So I see it as the gateway to this huge polycrisis that we currently live in, that your daughter, my sons, have to bear the responsibility and the anxiety of right now. And this is obviously with mental health and everything that we talk about with technology, but it's also, overconsumption. The fact that we use 1.7 planets worth of resource every single year because we're consuming so much stuff, trying to fill this hole inside of us that will never, ever be satisfied with stuff. And we've got overconsumption has been massively turbocharged by the invention of plastic. Fast fashion cannot exist without plastic. 70% of all our textiles are made out of plastic. So many things. Social media, it's built on selling us more stuff, making us feel inadequate if we don't have this newest, latest gizmo, largely plastic. So I see it as a gateway to so many things, biodiversity loss. We can go into all of those areas. So it's not for me a pollution problem. It's a gateway to this polycrisis of everything, including human health. But the great thing is, no, it's not just the gateway in, it's also the gateway out. Because the changes that we make, systemic changes of how we live, how we buy, how we shop fundamentally, what our manufacturing and our food systems are, and our material systems of what we make stuff with, because we're always going to need stuff. When we change those, the impact is so much more than a straight material swap. It will have an enormous impact on that polycrisis.
So just coming back to buying stuff, internet, because people have got to make money, they've got to develop products, etc. So it's actually saying, how can the bigger companies develop materials that are not plastic, that more of the businesses can crop up and they can use these different materials?
So it's very easy for us to think that there's only plastic. I get that all the time because we work with industry. Oh, we've just, it's so sad that there's only plastic, there's no other materials. And our role is to say, actually, here is a plethora of other materials that you can use, materials that nature knows how to handle. Because we know that nature doesn't know how to handle plastic. We can see that. It's an insult to nature, it's an insult to ourselves. So we know that there are so many different materials, and that is the opportunity. So if you imagine the billions, the trillions of dollars that have gone into making plastic this incredible material, so that it's stretchy or it's rigid, so many, it's in the paint on the walls behind us, it's in the lacquer on my wooden floor here, it's in our carpets, it's in our textiles, it's everywhere. So when people talk about, oh, there's no plastic in my life, I have to say, I don't know. You really need to look at that because it's incredibly difficult to have no plastic in your life. It's in concrete, it's in tires, it's everywhere. So the opportunity for us to replace all of these different uses of plastic is enormous. And I think what is very exciting for me is when you get this biochemistry world of bioidenticals and working with nature, and also the power of technology and including AI, the acceleration that we can have in order to catch up with those trillions of dollars of investment to make plastic so great is going to give us these enormous opportunities in biomaterials. And the UK particularly, we're very, very good at innovation. This is something that it's just innate that we are good at innovation. And I see so many startups, and I speak to people from Asia, America, everywhere. And when I'm talking to people within the world of materials saying, so what are you seeing out there? So often they will say, most of the innovation is coming out of the UK and Europe. So we should be very proud of that. We should be supporting that at government level in any way that we can. And these materials, they work in a very different way. And just to explain a little bit, a lot of people listening will understand that there's a lot of buzz at the moment about the circular economy. So all industry are looking to how can our products be more circular? Plastic is not circular. You can never shoehorn plastic into any kind of circular economy model because it comes from an unsustainable, unrenewable resource at the very beginning, extracted out of the ground as oil. And then it is toxic in pretty much all of its lifespan. And every piece of plastic, unless it's been burnt, ever made, still exists on the planet today. There is nothing circular in this model. Every time we recycle it, it creates a huge amount of toxicity in the form of nano and microplastics. But the chemicals that we use in plastic also compound up, and the material itself degrades. And there is no financial incentive for the Coca-Colas of the world and their 120 billion plastic bottles they pump out every single year. There's no incentive for them to use more recycled material because it's inferior quality and it's more expensive than virgin plastic. So that model just doesn't exist, which is why only 9% of plastic in the world has ever been recycled. So if we take plastic out of that circular economy and think, so if we work with what is the original circle of life, nature, really the circular economy is not something that we have just invented in this century. It's simply working with nature. And if you take materials from nature, which is what we do every day, we borrow resource from nature. Imagine if we could change the system that when we bake it, mold it, shape it, make it useful for us in some way, that instead of, as we do with plastic and leather and everything right now, toxify it so it can never go back to nature as a nutrient. Imagine if we could take these nutrients for nature, because there is no waste in nature, we're simply borrowing the nutrients for the next stage of growth, keep them safe and therefore and toxin free. So when they go back to nature, which everything does, including our bodies, then they'd go back to nature still as nutrients. And that is the circular economy that we all need to aspire to. It's not a recycling economy. It's working with nature, keeping things clean so that they go back in a safe way. And if we made materials like that, not only are they safe for nature, they're also safe for us.
Let's go back to the recycling conversation, because
Mm.
I think the plan is always let's do more recycling bins, let's have more of it. And I think your philosophy is let's have no recycling bins.
On plastic, I'm saying recycle, fill your boots, fill your recycling bins with metal, with glass, with paper, with car, all of those things. There is a viable, healthy recycling system in place for those. And they deserve to go back into this system because it works. I mean, ideally, we would not have so much single use in the world. I think that we've got a fundamental break in our mentality, and plastic was the enabler of that. Thinking it's totally fine to spend all the energy and the resource and material to make something that you use once and you put in a bin. So let's take this plastic crisis also as a catalytic opportunity for us to wean ourselves off single use into new systems. And we can come back to that because there's some really exciting news about the adoption of these new systems that eradicate single use packaging. Plastic is going to go into your recycling bin. And as I've mentioned already, so much of it is either going to be incinerated or exported. Global plastic recycling rates are going down because it just isn't a financially viable model. It was never a material that was invented to be recycled. It was invented to last forever. It was invented to last for 500 years. Little things like, when we talk about bags for life, which by the way, we use more plastic making our bags for life now than we ever did before we started charging for the flimsy little plastic bags, because we're now using thicker plastic. Every UK household has on average 57 bags for life stashed away somewhere, you know. And when we say bags for life, we're not talking about let's use it 5 times. No, we're talking about King Charles using the bags for life that Henry VIII stashed under the sink at Windsor Castle. That's how long plastic lasts. So we have to really reframe what plastic was designed for. It was designed to last for hundreds of years, if not centuries. That's what we should be using it for, not things that you use for moments like a little Q-tip, I don't know, a plastic fork. Most of the stuff that we use and then we chuck in the bin, that was not the intention of the invention of plastic.
There's something else that you were talking about at the conference, which I think is a shocking statistic, which is, well, you talk about whole health. So it's not just
Mm.
about environment, it's also about human health and what is happening with the plastics in the bodies and our children and brains. Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. Very easy for us to think that plastic is on the periodic table, like copper or aluminium or um, cobalt, or one of the things that when we were all at school and you had the periodic table. And plastic is so omnipresent, it's easy for us to think of it as a material in its own right. It is a mixture of chemicals. There are the fossil fuel polymers that give it the structure, but then, which is the plastic bit, but then we add thousands of chemicals to give it its different qualities. And this has been 50 plus years of unbelievable innovation to make plastic the default for everything. Those chemicals, of which we know the names of 16,000, there are many that we don't even know the names of. So imagine there's 16,000 chemicals making plastic right now. Less than 4,000 of those chemicals have been tested for impact on human health, for human health safety. And a huge chunk of those, well over 2,000, are considered toxic for human health. And this is not some random scientist. This is the European Register for Chemicals of Extreme Concern. So somehow, this material that has escalated so exponentially in usage in our lifetime has escaped all global regulation. That's something that we need to really look at. Yeah. And a lot of the chemicals that are used to give plastic its amazing quality are things like phthalates and bisphenols. So phthalates make, you might have heard of phthalates. They make um, plastic flexible, like cling film, or plastic bags. But then bisphenols make it rigid. So like my earphones here or the keyboard on this computer. So all the things that we use for rigid plastic, that's bisphenols. You might have heard of BPA. That's just one. That's the bad boy, the Al Capone of the bisphenol family, but they are all endocrine disrupting chemicals. Our endocrine system, that really very few people think about every day, is fundamental to the health of your body. It's the signaling system for how your body, from the minute that you are conceived in your womb, to how you grow, your immune system, your hormone system, everything about how your body will be, how it will live, how it will protect itself. It's your signaling system to tell it what to do. If we disrupt that, then we are in danger of seriously disrupting our health on many, many levels. Your propensity for cancer. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's kind of shocking to me the amount of young people getting cancer now. Breast cancer, yes, but also bowel cancer. And these are young people. This used to be an old person's condition, not a young person's condition. Cognitive disorders, the increase in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all of those things. Fertility issue, male fertility is down 53%. The scientists predict 53%. And not only is it at 53%, but the rate of decline has rapidly accelerated because these endocrine disrupting chemicals are so everywhere in our lives. I mean, you can't take a lungful of air on this planet now without inhaling micro and nanoplastics and the little EDCs, the endocrine disruptors that they carry, because they're vectors for those. You can't take a glass of water. You probably can't even eat an apple that doesn't now have plastic in it at some level. We've infected our entire planet. So you can imagine now how it's very, very difficult for us not to be impacted. When you look at the decline in biodiversity, we've got 70% less winged insects in Europe alone. You know, we've lost 70% of the big fish of the ocean. So we've lost 50% of the phytoplankton of the ocean. So if you think, wow, this is impacting us, it's also impacting every other living thing on planet Earth. And when we look at the fertility that issue that we have, and you may say, yeah, but Sian, people are having babies later now. So of course their fertility is impacted there. But snails and mice and badgers and dogs, they're not waiting to have a career and deciding to have babies later, and their fertility is also impacted. So we have created this chemical soup that has a huge impact on us, and it has a disproportionate impact on babies and young children.
Can we reverse that? I mean, we obviously don't make medical claims and things like that on this show, but can we reverse that?
You can definitely reduce your exposure to these EDCs, to these chemicals. It is very, very difficult to do so. So there is a film coming out. I don't know when this is going to be broadcast, but there is a film coming out on Netflix, which I think is going to be really incendiary. And it talks a lot about this. It's called The Plastic Detox. And it will be on Netflix in the middle of March. Anybody who's watching, I think they'll find it fascinating because it focuses very much on fertility. And it talks a lot about how can we impact it? Can we start to reverse the impact on male and female fertility? And it's things like, it's some things that you wouldn't really expect. It's like your personal care items. I mean, nobody really knows that 99% of the skincare and the shampoos and the conditioners and the body lotions and the shower gels and all these things that we put on our skin, the largest organ of the human body, um, they contain plastics. And they contain plastics in the forms of things like silicons and acrylates. And I know because I ran a skincare brand, I did innovation in that area for 10 years. So I understand that you add these things in order to give it that slip and that feel, that texture that we think of as luxury, but it's really just plastic. So not only are we applying them to our skin, color makeup, all of it, but we're also putting it on in the shower. And of course, where is it all washing? Down, straight into the plug hole,
Yeah.
into the water system.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because you see all these, the Zoe and the Whoop and all these different things that are monitoring all the different things from our steps to our health to our fitness to whatever. I wonder whether there'll be technology that actually starts monitoring the plastics within our bodies.
Yeah, it exists now.
Oh, does it?
So it's very, yeah, it does. So you can, have your blood tested. Um, it won't be a happy result, I can almost guarantee. And it varies hugely. It's quite interesting to see how widely the different levels are. Um, but it kind of escapes the point of, yes, of course we can measure what we have, and some of it, of course, passes through our body naturally, but we're constantly topping it up. And there is also a misconception that huge doses of some of these chemicals are the problem, but actually it's the minute continual doses that are much more harmful. Yeah.
And obviously you do a lot with governments and legislation, because actually, as you say, you can't do it. The consumers can't make this choice, can they?
No, no. I mean, when journalists say, "Oh, Sian, can we pop round and photograph your fridge? I'd love to see what a plastic-free fridge looks like." It's like, well, think again. Why do you think I do this? I do this because it's too hard for us. Busy, time poor, often cash poor people to go to the farmers markets and all of these things. That's not a reality for the majority of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that live not just in the UK, but the rest of the world. So it has to happen at government level. We have to ban things. And when we ban things, an extraordinary thing happens. We create a vacuum that innovation will then flourish. So if I asked you to pop out in London today and find a plastic takeaway fork, you wouldn't
No,
find one.
no, they've been banned, haven't they? When,
We
when were they banned?
we
When were plastic forks banned?
last year.
Yeah.
Are we eating with our fingers? No. We've innovated. So it's so simple. If you ban things, innovation will flourish. And actually, innovation and then the attention and the funding streams are focused on these new biomaterials of the future. And we work with a lot of those startups, and it breaks my heart how hard it is to raise money. And it's hard to raise money because industry are not pushed into using these new materials. And if I were a brand director at L'Oreal or working at Tesco's, I would also be thinking, why would I take the risk on my watch? Why would I be the one that pushes water uphill to do the right thing and take plastic out of packaging and our supply chain and introduce these new biomaterials? Because I might actually only be in this job for the next 2 years. So, I'm not going to bother. And that's the problem that we have right now. If it doesn't come from the top down, that's from governments and from CEOs within industry saying this has to happen because it's fundamentally the right thing to do, then it won't happen because it's too hard.
And how are you getting on with the government? How is that? Is it making an impact already? What you're doing?
Um, I'd love to say yes, but it's incredibly snail's pace. And little things like, a plastic tax was introduced. It's just considered a cost of doing business now. People would rather pay the tax than use even 30% recycled content because it's such a small tax on a very, very cheap, most subsidized material in the world. Then it's better just to pay it and then carry on with business as usual.
Mm,
Obviously, everything that's happening in the US is not helpful. There
no.
was the last 3 years, we have had the UN sitting, which is to negotiate with all 187 member states to negotiate a global plastics treaty that will address the problem of plastic pollution. And you cannot address pollution without addressing production. It was fascinating to me. I attended a lot of those negotiating sessions, but to see that kind of unilateral diplomacy at work with the oil state, the petrostate chemicals sitting next to member state delegates, whispering in their ear of how to derail the whole process. So governments are incredibly lobbied by the fossil fuel industry, and we need to be very aware that big oil is big plastic, and plastic is their plan B. So there is a reduction in the need for oil for energy with
Yeah.
the rise in renewables, their plan B, their soft landing is plastic. So they are set to treble plastic production by 2050, 2060. So if we think that we have a problem now, that we have a pollution problem, a devastation to the health of everything on the planet problem, we ain't seen nothing yet.
How does that make you feel?
Challenged, but not, I'm a natural born optimist, and I get up every morning feeling blessed to do what I do. If I'm really honest, to feel excited about what I do. Somebody just said to me, if you had one song, it was only an hour ago, said if you had one song that was symbolize your life, what would it be? And I, without even thinking, I said it would be Queen. Don't Stop Me Now. Uh,
Oh, that's brilliant. I
and
love
so
that.
yeah, so it's got to be that one now. But I feel there was something so extraordinarily powerful about the plastic crisis. It's undeniable. We all feel a little bit guilty about what we have done with our addiction to this amazing but toxic, indestructible material. And I think that it's visible, it's tangible. There's no one else to blame. Carbon, I don't know. How are you and me gonna, it's not our problem really, carbon, our little individual carbon footprint. Even that was invented by industry to put the onus on that, on us. Exactly the same with plastic. The whole recycling thing was, how do we shift it from industry and the fact that actually recycling doesn't happen? How do we shift it to the public? Make them think, if only you would put it in the right bin. So it makes me excited to think that the plastic crisis, and the reason I'm so obsessed by plastic, is I do see it as that gateway into the polycrisis and the gateway out. And I know that seeing these new biomaterials starting to flourish, seeing the systems change where we talk about returnable packaging system, where I'm only buying the product inside. I didn't want to buy the packaging. Don't give me the guilt of putting it in a bin. No, I'd much rather have this smart packaging, this asset track to me that I can then drop off in thousands of places and get rewarded for that tiny shift in my behavior. I'm signing up to that kind of future, not the Jurassic Park of Boots or Superdrug with those aisles of coloured plastic. So I see it still as such an incredible opportunity for us to do the right thing.
I think, Sian, you and I, just because we've lived through, a few decades, we do remember taking our bottles back. We remember our milk bottles and recycling all that side of it. And plastic wasn't around. We just didn't have plastic in the same way. So it's been
Mm.
it's been a very quick escalation, hasn't it?
It has unbelievably fast, really, in the last 25 years, that massive ramp up. I mean, and then you think, and what is the impact of that? Fast fashion is such a great example. Fast fashion didn't exist only 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And now it's considered completely normal that you can go online and you can buy a dress for 12.99 and a t-shirt for £1. Somebody's getting screwed along that supply chain. And you can almost guarantee that it is not affordable to make those items without using plastic. So here we are now with 70% of our textiles made out of plastic, shedding. I mean, there is one village in Ghana that receives 15 million castaway charity clear out garments from the good British and beyond public. 15 million every week, every single week. 40% of them they burn immediately because they're rubbish. And largely, obviously, that's just burning plastic. So it's extraordinary to me that you look at the fast fashion industry and think, why is this not a more responsible industry? And I love fashion. I mean, the whole thing of fashion for me is just, it's about craft and beauty and elegance and enhancement and self-expression. It makes me so sad that it's now about one of the most pristine deserts in the world, the Atacama Desert in Chile, which satellites have witnessed is now just a dumping ground of fast fashion.
Are you excited by seeing how certainly I'm seeing a lot more people doing recycling of clothes and vintage and all the different secondhand platforms. Are you excited to see that?
I love that. So yes, the most sustainable thing you can buy or the most sustainable thing you can wear is something you already own. And the most sustainable thing that you can buy is something from a Vinted or eBay or any of those, I think those platforms, or Known Source, all of these platforms, I think some of them, particularly something like Known Source, has elevated the whole area of secondhand fashion to an art form. These are collector's items now,
And
and
it's
and
lovely
that's the ultimate self-expression.
and it's lovely seeing. I certainly love seeing my children and their wives and all their friends buying from these platforms and selling and buying it. It's fun, isn't it? It's fun too
Mm,
as well.
it's really fun, and there is a wonderful forensic journalist, Veronica Bates Casalti, and I follow her on LinkedIn. I think she's amazing. And she has a whole thing, which is when you measure the value of something, you have to value it by the number of wears. And if you start to think about your clothes as the number of wears, and then actually it kind of makes sense to invest in better pieces. And we all know that it is better for us to own fewer, better things. And the whole fast fashion explosion and social media that makes you feel like you're lacking something. This is going to make you happy now. To buy, I think is very sad. And to see a new generation pushing back against that and saying, no, I have my own style and I'm going to buy secondhand and I'm going to circulate my stuff and I'm going to borrow other people's, and not having to buy new all the time is just so incredible. And we could all learn from them.
I think what's interesting, because I run lots of events where attract consumers as well, and what's interesting is watching how people have started to buy a lot more because of the value of it and how good it was, and then with the crisis, the money crisis at the moment, people are going back to the slightly older ways of doing it and doing it cheap, and that's the hard thing, because it all comes down to actually people's financial situation.
Mm, yes. And when I look at how we sell food, for example, and ultra processed foods, and the cost of living crisis, and families who have £25 a week to feed a family of four, it is so immoral the way that we are selling food. Our food systems are fundamentally broken. We have totally lost connection with where food comes from, with our long supply chains. And plastic and UPFs, ultra processed foods, are absolute bedfellows because they can't exist without each other. And if you think about the fact that we now think we're totally entitled to have mango from Pret and blueberries from Sainsbury's all year round, and look at how that is made possible, it's because of plastic packaging. So that's another reason that I think how extraordinary it could be, the impact on the food system, if we didn't use plastic to wrap our food and drink, because it is the most fundamental misuse of this chemically laced material, and
Yeah.
we really should stop it. And if you go to, it was shocking to me, I was with a friend yesterday, has breast cancer. Her oncologist said, by the way, take plastic out of your kitchen. And he said, why do you need to get breast cancer? For somebody to tell you that, for a doctor to tell you that. So I'm very excited at the opportunity for us to really fundamentally change our food systems to something that is more localized, more seasonal, and therefore much more healthy.
There was something else that you talked about at the event was, and I remember it was the dashboard and all the little insects that we used to get on our dashboard when we were driving, and suddenly they aren't there anymore. Why is
I
that?
know, I know. Well, this is a myriad of things, and it's all to do with the environmental crisis, and plastic is just one part of that. But you're right, nearly in
Windscreen, I
Europe
meant, not
alone.
dashboard,
Yeah,
windscreen.
I
Sorry.
know. I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant. But yeah, I remember just it was a thing when you got to the end of a long journey and you unfurled yourself from the car, and then the first thing that you had to do was clean the windscreen, or make sure your little jets were working and give it a good old wipe because it was splattered. There was all those jokes about what's sorry, a bit rude. What's we used to have a thing, me and my brothers. Oh, look at that one on the windscreen. What was the last thing that went through his mind? His arse. Because Because it was a thing that your
Yes.
windscreen was constantly
Yeah.
spattered.
Yeah. It was.
And now I will drive, from London, let's say, all the way down to Dorset, maybe a bug, but barely any. So we have lost 80% of the winged insects of Europe. We talk a lot about bees. It's so much more fundamental than that. And we all understand how everything is totally interconnected in our ecological, our planetary systems of life. And you take one species out, this has a disproportionate knock-on effect. And when you lose 80% of the winged insects of the world, that's a very, very big effect. And then when we get to the ocean and you look at the impact that we've had on the ocean, one of the big projects that we are funding at the moment is a big research project on what is the biggest migration that happens every single day. And they're these tiny little critters called phytoplankton. And the phytoplankton come to the surface of the ocean and they take the carbon dioxide out and they use that as a nutrient and they poop out, so they're pooping out the carbon and then it sinks down to the bottom of the ocean bed. So it embeds itself into the ocean floor. So that is a big part of the cycle of carbon. 30% of the carbon of the world is taken, is sequestered out of the atmosphere in this way. Microplastics are having a huge impact because it floats this soup from the bed all the way to the top. These invisible to the eye little nanoplastics that they are also eating. So they are now ingesting the plastic, the poop comes out, the poop now floats so it doesn't sink to the bottom of the ocean. So that's just a fundamental to look at how do you destroy one of the biggest carbon pumps in the whole carbon system. And that's what we're doing by disrupting the way that this hugely delicate and incredible web of life works to protect us and give us a livable planet.
If plastic didn't exist today, would we? I was going to say, if plastic didn't exist today, would we want to develop it?
That's a great question. And scientists will say, material scientists would say, if we hadn't invented plastic, we would have invented something else that gave us what plastic gives us. And the problem that we have right now is that for the last 50 years, because we've had plastic, we've become incredibly lazy at inventing new materials, and particularly lazy at investing in the creation of new materials. So now is our moment for that innovation. And we need to stop thinking that there will be another miracle plastic. There'll be one monomaterial that we can use for everything ever again, because that isn't how nature works. And I think we fully understand now that we cannot work against nature. But people, say tritely, "Oh, but we are nature. So we're part of it." Of course we are. And so we have to work with nature, not against her. So any materials that we invent now are going to have to be materials that come from nature as nutrients, that we keep as nutrients and we give back as nutrients.
Get back in the
We just
cycle.
need to think
Yeah.
about borrowing materials, not giving back any old toxic sludge at the end of it.
What are you excited about? What materials are you excited about at the moment? I mean, obviously there's things like bamboo, all sorts of things coming. What are the sort of innovation that's coming through?
Mm. There's going to be a massive increase in the use of molded fiber. So if you think about things like egg boxes, so egg boxes, which are generally made out of old newspapers, they pulp them up, they press them. That's very primitive. Now, if you go and buy something in technology, let's say you go and buy a new iPhone, remember when you had that lovely unboxing experience with that beautiful white box and everything's laid out so nicely inside? That is made of molded fiber. So we've gone from egg box level to being able to create something that looks so beautiful that Apple, the most aesthetic brand in the world, considers good enough for them. There is no plastic in the packaging supply chain for Apple now because they've moved none. They're one of the very few businesses in the world that have managed to eradicate plastic in their packaging. And all the other technology companies pretty much are following suit. So that kind of innovation. And when we're talking about molded fiber and paper, I want to reassure people we're not talking about cutting down trees, because of course we need trees more than ever before. You never would cut a tree down in order to make pulp, which is molded fiber. You'd only ever have the waste part of the tree. The main bulk of the tree is timber. The waste part, the top, might go into the molded fiber industry. But most of that industry is using agricultural waste. So cellulose is the most abundant material on planet Earth. It makes the structure of plants. So it's such a part of the system of how the world works, that a plant grows, it dies, it becomes the nutrient for the day, and that's majority of that is cellulose. And cellulose can be very strong. So I'm really excited to see all the new innovation in cellulose, be it through molded fiber, but then also in other ways that we can use cellulose. So there are new leathers that we can see using natural rubber, combining it with other natural materials like cork, coconut coir, things like that, to create leather that is almost imperceptible to animal leather. But because most animal leather also has a plastic coating on it, and a lot of the vegan leathers, they're just plastic. So the truly plant-based leathers, I think, are really interesting. I love seeing what's happening in laboratories in the fermentation process. There is a company called Shellworks, and anyone who buys, do you know wild deodorant? The shower gel bottles of wild deodorant that you can now buy in Tesco. So super exciting. It's at scale, it's affordable, and those are made out of fermented microbes. So this material, as once it's served its purpose, if that escapes into the environment or it's in any kind of a composting bin, it will disintegrate and nothing but nutrients. There is an amazing brand. I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more. Sneakers, trainers. I don't know how many pairs of trainers you've got, but I have quite the collection. And who knew the massive impact on our carbon allowance the trainer industry is? It's pretty much half. Yeah, it's pretty much half of the entire airline industry. So that gives you some
Can you just
idea.
repeat that? So just repeat what you just said.
Yes. So the aviation industry that everybody focuses on,
Yeah.
the carbon impact of the sneaker industry is half of that. So it gives you an idea. We make 25 billion pairs of sneakers every single year. They are largely plastic. They're never going to be recycled. I mean, they're multiple materials. So a really interesting company to me. And I love it when it's young entrepreneurs, particularly
Yeah.
British, and they're
Yeah.
pushing water upstream because they are really taking on the giants of the sportswear world. And it's called Purified Footwear. And the sneaker that he has developed, the trainer he's developed, you can tell us speak in America sometimes. The trainer that he has developed, it degenerates. So after use, I mean, it's not going to degenerate on a rainy day, but after use, it goes back into the soil, and the soil is healthier. Once this sneaker, its sole, its upper, everything, the foam inside, once it disintegrates into soil, and it becomes the nutrients for all the little microbes in the soil. The soil is healthier before than it was after than it was before. And that kind of innovation of really working with the circle of nature is really exciting to me.
That's what I love. It's exciting, and I think that's where you come from. And it's one of the things that I picked up most actually was the fact that yes, it's all scary. This is where we are, but actually, it's about the solutions. It's about these
Mm.
amazing people that are coming forward saying, "We want to change this, but we're going to make some money from it, and we're going to innovate, and we're going to make it happen." Because I know you say that it's got to be the big people at the top to turn the tap off, but consumerism is also going to help that.
Yeah, it definitely is. And if we have one responsibility, it's to really think about clicking buy now. And do we really, really need it? Because we get that little dopamine hit. I get it. You've had a bad day, you've had a good day, you deserve something. You go
Glass of
online, it's
wine,
so,
shop.
yeah,
It's a
it's
dopamine, isn't
so
it?
easy.
Dopamine. Yeah.
It really is. And what's always fascinating to me, because we're a big sailing family, we love to go and rent a little boat and sail around Greece. That's our absolute dream holiday. And that's my happy place. Um, but what's amazing is you spend 2 weeks on a boat and you realize how little you need. And then you get home. Have you ever moved house and you had to put your stuff into storage? And then, and then you just think, I don't even want it back. And we've got a garage full of stuff, and it's I'd like to say it's my husband's, but I'm sure there's stuff in there he says is mine, because he's a bit more of a hoarder than me. But I'd be really happy if it burnt down because I don't even want to deal with it. I have lived without it for so long. I don't even want to know what's in there. We're such hoarders. We have the second, I think we are the second biggest self storage, the big yellow box companies in the world. We are the biggest users of those outsourcing our storage of all of our stuff. We really don't need all this stuff.
I do know, I love talking to you. There's an awful lot of history that I've been involved in with my father in the medical world and all sorts of things. So it just resonates so well with me. But it's looking at differently because everyone's saying we've got to go and clear the beaches and the oceans, and and that's only going to get worse. And there's not enough people to do it. And also the blame that goes on to the consumer, it's their responsibility. And I think the way you're coming in from it, I think also from a business point of view, not a charity, because we are charioted out, I think, in this country. I've fundraised for a lot of charities and I know what it's like. And actually with a business hat on, I think you're going to create a huge impact. I would love you to leave 3 tips to our listeners. I believe in the power of 3: inspire, engage, bring people together, and also eat, nourish, love. What are the 3 things you'd like to leave our listeners with?
So, as I said at the beginning, I wish I'd really thought about this before. So I'm just going to speak from the heart and say what I'm thinking now. The first thing takes us back to that whole overconsumption thing. And I would really love people to think a bit more about how much they shop, how much they buy, how much they need, and particularly at those times of year like Christmas. And we're so sucked in to all of that rigmarole of how much stuff we can give each other, and then you see your own pile of presents and just think, I don't really even need any of this stuff. I'd rather people save their money. So somebody said to me once they wanted to develop an Amazon app, which is buy now, but then it's also got a drop down that says buy later, buy tomorrow, borrow from a friend. And I just thought, what a brilliant idea that would be. If somebody could develop that, I think that would be fantastic. Um, my second thing is is going to be about health. And it's a big call out to any new parents, new grandparents to say, really keep plastic as much as you possibly can. And I know how hard it is because you're going to be given a million plastic teddy bears and all the rest. Try and keep it away from your baby. So try and use glass bottles. Try and use, teethers and pacifiers, all of those things. Try not to use plastic. And then the other big one is bedding. So really focus on, think how many hours your baby spends lying in a cot. So make sure that you're using natural fibers there because that's a very persistent offload of chemicals onto your new one, your tiny new, most precious bundle in the world. And then my final thing is, I find it extraordinary still that we live in this polycrisis and we are an educated society here in the UK and we have power, and we love to talk and we don't talk about these things and we feel a bit nervous about it, and it's I mean, I will go to a dinner party and no, I will not talk to anybody about plastic unless they ask me because I don't want to be like the plastic. Oh my god, here she comes, it's the plastic. I the plastic bottles. Sean's in the house. But it's really amazing to me that we will sit in the pub and at the dinner parties and we will talk about everything, your skiing holiday, stamp duty, school fees, all those kind of absolute privileged things. We'll talk about the cost of living, we'll talk about divorce, but we will not talk about the things that are going to dramatically impact our children. And I put plastic in that camp, and that is the climate crisis. And we need to educate ourselves so that we can speak about these things and not ignore them, because we are the generation, I am the generation that is responsible for this. And we have had the best of times. And we have one responsibility now, and that is for the rest of my life, I'm going to do what I can to reverse some of the damage that I bear the guilt of.
Oh my goodness, you talk from the heart. You are strong, emotional. Your message is so powerful. You've certainly made me think a lot. I've got members of my family who will understand exactly what you say and they won't use plastics. And I love it because they're there with you. What gives you hope?
I think humanity is fundamentally good. And I used to think that industry and governments were going to lead us out of this mess. And I don't think so anymore. I think it's going to be the public at large. And I think we are witnessing right now, there was an extraordinary thing that happened at the end of last year called a national emergency briefing. Anybody Google it and have a look at that. And I think that was a really brilliant initiative that I'm going to personally learn from a lot. And I think it was an opportunity for everybody to learn very, very quickly, and calling for a national emergency briefing on the polycrisis to be live televised, like COVID. We are in an emergency right now. We're just hiding under the blankets. And what gives me optimism is when we tap in to the goodness, the fundamental goodness of people. And when we come together, I think we have extraordinary power. And now is the moment that we've got to do that. Stop thinking about our own selfish needs and come together in a way like we never have before, because we can topple governments. We can topple industry. We can break toxic brands. We can do what we like because we have the power of the purse, and the movement will always win.
Sian, thank you so much for being on my podcast. Honestly, it's one of my favourite conversations.
Aww.
Before we go, please let everyone know where they can find you. It'll be in the show notes too, but please let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, of course, they can see our website, which is aplasticplanet.com. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. You can also visit Plastic Free, which is a global solutions platform, plasticfree.com, that we built. And then you can follow me. I do very little on social media other than LinkedIn. Because I find, LinkedIn, you find something that works for me. LinkedIn, I learn from more than I learn from the media. So somehow the algorithm works for me. So anybody who wants to follow me on LinkedIn, I'd love to see them.
Thank you, Sian, so much. I really have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I hope that the rest of your week goes great.
Thank you.